You are listening to Blackout Radio. The time is 6:04 in the morning, and we are interrupting our regularly scheduled programming with what we are calling a full emergency broadcast. I am Daniel Voss, and alongside me is my co-anchor Maya Ross, and we will not be leaving this desk until this situation is resolved. Here is what we know right now. Hurricane Veila, a storm that has been intensifying at a rate that has left meteorologists at the Valaran National Weather Authority struggling to find historical comparisons, has just been formally upgraded to a Category 6 classification under the expanded Saffir-Simpson Protocol, adopted internationally just 14 months ago. Sustained winds are currently measured at 212 miles per hour, with gusts recorded at the outer bands reaching 231. Veila's eye wall diameter is 43 miles across. The storm's current track puts landfall at the city of Port Caldera, capital of the Republic of Veila, in approximately 8 hours and 20 minutes. That is the best estimate as of this moment. The pressure at the center of this storm, and I want listeners to hear this carefully, is 862 millibars. That is the lowest central pressure ever recorded in this ocean basin. This is, by every measurable metric, the most powerful tropical cyclone in recorded history.
Daniel, thank you. And I want to begin by just acknowledging what this moment means for the people who are waking up to this broadcast right now, because somewhere out there, a mother just turned on her kitchen radio while making breakfast for her children and heard those numbers, and her hands are shaking over the coffee pot. We know that, we feel that, and we want you to know that we are going to be with you every step of the way through this. For our listeners who are just joining us, Port Caldera is a city of approximately 1.4 million people on the western coast of Veila. To the south, the Moreau Delta, home to another estimated 600,000 residents spread across the low-lying communities of Mero City Solamarsh and the barrier island communities of the Caldera Archipelago. To the north, the port town of Havenbrook, which has a population of roughly 280,000. These are real communities, these are real families, and as of this moment, the evacuation order issued by the Valaran government at 3:15 this morning has been in effect for less than 3 hours. The roads out of Port Caldera, we are already being told, are at a standstill.
That's correct, Maya. We have confirmed reports from the Valaran Department of Transportation that Highway 1, the primary northern evacuation corridor out of Port Caldera, has been gridlocked since approximately 4:30 this morning. The southern route, Regional Road 7, which connects Port Caldera to the inland city of Valle Cruz, is functioning but moving at roughly 12 to 15 miles per hour. Emergency management officials have implemented contraflow on both major arteries, meaning all lanes are now directed outbound from the coast. But here is the mathematical reality. With 1.4 million people in Port Caldera alone, and an estimated vehicle capacity allowing perhaps 800,000 people to evacuate by road in the time remaining, there is a significant population that will not make it out before Veila arrives. The Valaran government has designated 17 inland shelter facilities, including the Valle Cruz Convention Center, the University of San Ronaldo Sports Complex, and a number of secondary school gymnasiums across the interior highlands. Collectively, those facilities hold approximately 320,000 people. The arithmetic on this situation is deeply concerning.
We have our message lines open, and they have been ringing since we went on air at 6 o'clock. I want to share one of the first messages we received because it captures something important. This came in via our text line from a listener who identifies herself only as Cecilia in the Sola Marsh community south of Port Caldera. She writes, I have my 3 children, my mother who cannot walk, and 1 car. We have been on Road 7 for 2 hours and have moved less than 4 miles. My gas tank is at a quarter. My mother is on oxygen. I don't know what to do. Please, if anyone hears this, please tell me what to do. And I want to be honest with our listeners right now. We cannot tell Cecilia what to do with certainty. What we can tell her, and what we are urging emergency officials to communicate clearly, is that if you cannot evacuate, if you are trapped on a road, if you have medical needs that make movement impossible, you need to find the highest interior room in the most structurally sound building available to you. Stay away from windows, fill your bathtub with water now, do not wait, and please contact your local emergency services if you have any ability to do so.
We want to update our listeners on the geographic scope of this emergency because it extends well beyond Veilara's coastline. The Caldera Archipelago, a chain of 9 barrier islands that sit between 12 and 30 miles offshore, has a combined year-round population of approximately 47,000 people. Emergency officials began ordering evacuations of those islands 36 hours ago, when Veila was still a Category 4 system. However, ferry services were suspended 16 hours ago due to worsening sea conditions. Our information from the Veilaran Coast Guard indicates that at the time of suspension, an estimated 9,000 residents and tourists had not yet been evacuated from those islands. Those individuals are now sheltering in place. Additionally, the island nation of Santiago, approximately 180 miles to the southwest, was struck by the outer bands of Veila beginning roughly 2 hours ago. Santiago's capital, Santiago City, has a population of approximately 340,000. The storm's outer bands are producing rainfall of 3 to 4 inches per hour there currently, with sustained winds of 85 miles per hour. We have confirmed reports of flooding in the low-lying coastal districts of Santiago City.
And as we talk about these numbers, 47,000 on the archipelago, 340,000 in Santiago City, I want to remind our listeners that these are not abstractions. We are receiving messages from people on those islands right now. One listener who signs his message as Tomas from Isla Barreta in the archipelago writes, "We are in the community center with about 200 people. The building is concrete block, built in 1987. The windows are already bowing in the wind, and the storm hasn't even come close yet. We have 3 children under the age of 5 with us, 2 elderly men, and 1 woman who is 8 months pregnant. We have 2 days of food and some water. We are praying." I read that message, and I think about the community center coordinator who is standing in that room right now, looking at those faces, trying to project a calm they may not feel, because that is what human beings do in crisis. We find someone to be strong so that others can lean on them, and whoever that person is in that community center on Isla Barreta tonight, we see you, we honor you.
We are now 1 hour into our emergency broadcast. The time is 7:04 in the morning. I want to give listeners an updated storm track as we have just received new data from the Veilaran National Weather Authority's 7 a.m. advisory. Veila has continued to intensify. I will repeat that. The storm has continued to intensify. Central pressure has dropped an additional 3 millibars to 859. Maximum sustained winds are now clocked at 217 miles per hour. The storm has slowed slightly in forward speed and is now moving at 11 miles per hour on a heading of 310 degrees northwest. This slight westward jog is significant. It brings the center of Veila approximately 12 miles closer to the Miro Delta than previous models had suggested. Meteorologists are now placing the most likely point of landfall between the southern districts of Port Caldera and the northern reaches of the Miro wetlands. The storm surge forecast has been revised upward. For Port Caldera's waterfront and harbor districts, officials now project a storm surge of between 28 and 34 feet above normal tide levels. For the Miro Delta, which sits at an average elevation of 6 feet above sea level, that surge number, up to 30 feet of water pushing inland, is nearly incomprehensible in practical terms.
30 feet of water, I want our listeners to really sit with that. If you're in a 2-story home in the Miro Delta, and there are tens of thousands of such homes, the surge alone, not counting rainfall, not counting wind, would submerge your entire ground floor and much of your second. The Veilaran government confirmed at 6:45 this morning that President Alondra Serrano has declared a national state of emergency and has formally requested assistance from 3 neighboring nations, Caldoria, the federal states of Moreno, and the island nation of Cressa. The federal states of Moreno, Asaung, Veilara's largest regional ally, has already pre-positioned 2 naval vessels and 4 Coast Guard cutters outside the storm zone, loaded with emergency supplies, medical teams, and water purification equipment. President Serrano, in a statement released just minutes ago, said, and I'm quoting directly from the official communique, "The people of Veilara have faced storms before. We have always risen, but we are asking the world to stand with us today, because what is coming to our shores is unlike anything any of us have seen in our lifetimes." Those words from a head of state are not hyperbole, they are fact.
Port Caldera International Airport, which handles approximately 4.2 million passengers annually, has been officially closed as of 6:30 this morning. The last commercial flight departed at 6:18 a.m. A chartered evacuation flight carrying 187 passengers, primarily tourists and foreign nationals, who had been stranded after yesterday's cancellations. The airport's closure means that aerial evacuation and resupply operations will be severely constrained until conditions permit runway use again, which, based on current projections, will not occur until at minimum 18 to 24 hours from now. The Port of Caldera, one of the 3 largest commercial shipping ports in the region, began suspending operations at 11 p.m. last night. 12 cargo vessels and 4 cruise ships departed the port under emergency protocols. We have unconfirmed reports that 2 smaller vessels, a container ship and a fuel tanker, were unable to depart in time and are still moored at the port facility. Port Authority officials have not confirmed the status of the crews aboard those vessels, but we are working to verify.
The human traffic out of Port Caldera, and I use that word deliberately because right now human beings are the traffic, they are the cargo, they are the movement, is something that our correspondent on the ground described to us before communications began to degrade. She said the atmosphere on Highway 1 is unlike anything she has covered in 15 years of emergency journalism. She said people are out of their cars, standing on the highway, looking south at the horizon, where the sky has turned a color she described as, and this is her phrase, like a bruise the size of the world. People are holding children. People are on their knees. She saw a man, she said, sitting on the hood of a completely motionless car playing guitar in the middle of the evacuating highway. And she said people stopped and stood around him for a moment before the traffic nudged forward and everyone returned to their vehicles. I don't know what that man was playing, but I think about why he was playing it, and I think we all understand.
The time is now 8:22 in the morning. We are 2 hours and 18 minutes into our emergency broadcast. I want to deliver the first confirmed casualty report of this event. The Santiago Emergency Management Authority has confirmed 2 deaths, both in the coastal district of Punta del Miro on Santiago Island, due to flooding caused by the outer bands of Hurricane Veila. Additionally, there are 12 injuries reported across Santiago City, 3 of which are described as serious. The outer band rainfall in Santiago has now totaled 9 inches in the past 4 hours, and river gauges across the island are reporting levels at or near flood stage. The Santiago government has mobilized its National Emergency Response Corps, approximately 1,200 trained personnel. and has opened 32 emergency shelters across the island's interior. We are also receiving reports of a structural collapse in the Barrio Nuevo neighborhood of Santiago City, where a two-story residential building partially collapsed due to flooding undermining its foundation. Search and rescue teams are on scene. There are believed to be occupants in the structure at the time of collapse.
We are getting word that the building that collapsed in Barrio Nuevo was a multifamily residence, an apartment building that, according to our sources, housed primarily low-income families, many of them elderly residents, who did not have the means or mobility to evacuate when the orders came. And that is a story that plays out in every disaster. The people who are left are so often the people who had the least to begin with, the people who couldn't afford a hotel room inland, the people whose car broke down last month and they haven't been able to fix it, the people who spent their last savings on medication for a sick family member. Disasters are never equal opportunity. The most vulnerable always bear the heaviest burden. And as this storm bears down on two nations, I think it is worth saying clearly, the measure of how a society responds to a catastrophe is not how quickly the government issues statements. It is how quickly help reaches the person in the apartment on the ground floor who could not get out.
Correct, Maya. And to that point, I want to update listeners on the status of emergency response pre-positioning within Veila itself. The Veilaran National Guard has activated all 14,200 of its personnel. Approximately 3,400 Guard members have been deployed to inland shelter facilities to manage logistics and maintain order. An additional 2,100 are stationed at key infrastructure points: the Valle Cruz Water Treatment Facility, the Caldera Highland Power Grid Relay Station, and the 3 remaining operational fuel depots in the interior. The remaining guardsmen are either in transit or held in reserve for post-storm search and rescue. The Cruz Azul de Veila, Veilara's national emergency relief organization, has staged approximately 180 metric tons of emergency supplies, including water, non-perishable food, blankets, and basic medical equipment at the Valle Cruz distribution hub, located 47 miles inland from Port Caldera. Hospital systems are operating under emergency protocols. The 3 major hospitals in Port Caldera, Caldera General, St. Ronaldo Medical Center, and the University Hospital of the Coast, have all transferred non-critical patients inland and are retaining only those too unstable to move. Critical care units are being sheltered in interior corridors and basement facilities.
The time is approaching 9 o'clock in the morning. We are nearly 3 hours into this broadcast, and I want to take a moment to read some of the listener messages that have continued to come in because they are extraordinary and because the people writing them deserve to be heard. A listener named Petros from the Havenbrook Waterfront District writes, "My grandfather built this house in 1961. It has survived 12 storms. I am 67 years old and I am staying. I know this is foolish, but I cannot leave this house. My grandfather is in these walls. I will ride it out." We are not in a position to tell Petros what to do. We are not in a position to judge him, but I will say this. If you are listening, Petros, please at minimum tell someone where you are. Tell a neighbor, text a friend inland, leave a note on the door, let someone know you're there. Because the people who will come looking for you after the storm will need to know where to start.
From a logistical standpoint, the decision made by individuals like Petros to shelter in place in the direct impact zone is one that emergency managers refer to as a non-compliant shelter in place. And it is a documented phenomenon in every major hurricane event in modern history. Research from the Veilaran Institute of Disaster Sciences, published just 2 years ago, found that in a Category 4 event that struck the northern Veilaran coast in 2019, approximately 12% of the Port Caldera urban population chose to remain in place despite evacuation orders. If that same percentage holds for today's event, which is a far more severe storm, It would mean approximately 168,000 people will be in Port Caldera when Veila makes landfall. In the Miro Delta region, where evacuation infrastructure is more limited, researchers estimated non-compliance rates as high as 22% in that same 2019 event. Applied to today's figures, that is potentially 132,000 people remaining in the Delta. Combined with the archipelago's 9,000 stranded residents, we are potentially looking at over 300,000 people in the direct impact zone at the time of landfall.
300,000 people, and the storm is 6 hours away. I received a message, and I want to share this one specifically from a woman named Lyria, who is a nurse at Caldera General Hospital. She is one of the essential workers who stayed behind. She writes, I am at the hospital. We have 43 patients, 2 critical to move, 12 staff, and 3 doctors. We have enough generator fuel for approximately 30 hours. We have adequate medication. We are scared, but we are ready. Please tell the families of our patients that their loved ones are not alone, that they are being cared for, that we will not leave them. That is our promise. That message from one nurse in one hospital in the dark hours before a catastrophic hurricane, I will remember that for the rest of my life.
The time is 10:15 in the morning. We are 4 hours and 11 minutes into our emergency broadcast, and I want to report on a significant development. The outer rain bands of Hurricane Veila have now reached the coastline of Port Caldera. Observers at the Caldera Lighthouse, one of the few remaining occupied positions on the waterfront, are reporting sustained winds at the coast of approximately 75 to 85 miles per hour, with higher gusts, significant wave action, and horizontal rain. The National Weather Authority's Doppler radar is showing the spiral banding structure of the hurricane clearly, and the innermost eye wall is now estimated at approximately 180 miles from the coast. Forward motion of the storm has picked up slightly. Veila is now moving at 13 miles per hour. This means the revised landfall estimate is approximately 5 hours and 30 minutes from this moment, placing it around 3:45 to 4 in the afternoon. Power outages have begun across the southern districts of Port Caldera. The Veila Power Authority has confirmed that as of 10 a.m., approximately 147,000 customers in the greater metropolitan area have lost electrical service. That number will increase dramatically in the hours ahead.
Power going out in Port Caldera means that right now in shelters and in homes across that city, people are watching the lights flicker and go dark, and the fear that creates that precise moment when the light goes out and darkness arrives and the wind is already moaning through every crack in the walls, that moment is one that people who have lived through hurricanes describe as the moment the abstract became real. You can know intellectually that a hurricane is coming. You can watch the radar, you can listen to this broadcast, but when the power cuts out and you are sitting in the dark with your family and you can hear the storm building outside, that is when it becomes something that lives in your body, not just your mind. Emergency officials are urging residents to use flashlights, not candles, to reduce fire risk. They are also urging anyone with a battery-powered or hand crank radio, like this one, to keep it on. They are urging people not to go outside for any reason. The wind speeds already arriving in Port Caldera are sufficient to turn ordinary objects into lethal projectiles.
We have received an updated report from the Santiago Emergency Management Authority, and I must share this immediately. The death toll from Hurricane Veila's impact on Santiago Island has risen to 11. Of those 11 deaths, 7 are attributed to drowning in the flooded Barrio Nuevo neighborhood of Santiago City following the building collapse I mentioned earlier. Rescue workers were able to reach the collapsed structure and pulled 4 survivors from the rubble, but 7 individuals, including, according to the Santiago Civil Registry, 3 children, did not survive. Additionally, 4 deaths have been confirmed from separate flooding incidents across the rural western parishes of Santiago. Emergency management officials estimate that between 8,000 and 12,000 residents of Santiago's coastal districts are currently sheltering in conditions of active flooding, with water levels in some neighborhoods having risen to 3 feet above floor level. The Santiago Defense Force has deployed all available watercraft for rescue operations, but has acknowledged that the number of people requiring rescue significantly exceeds current capacity.
11 people who woke up yesterday morning with no certainty that today would be their last, and among them 3 children. I don't have words for that are adequate. I don't think anyone does. What I will say is that the rescue workers who went into that flooded building in Barrio Nuevo, who went into a structure that had already partially collapsed in rising water, in winds that were increasing by the hour, those people made a choice to put their bodies between danger and a stranger. And 4 people are alive because of it. We hold both of those truths at the same time, the grief of the 7 and the miracle of the 4. That is what disaster looks like from the inside. Not one story, but thousands of simultaneous stories, all of them real, all of them happening at once, all of them mattering equally.
The time is now 11:47 in the morning. We are 5 hours and 43 minutes into our broadcast. Hurricane Veila is now less than 3 hours from landfall. The National Weather Authority's 11 a.m. advisory, which was delayed slightly due to communications disruptions at the main meteorological station, has painted an increasingly severe picture. The storm has not weakened. I will repeat that. The storm has not weakened. In fact, the latest aircraft reconnaissance flight into the eye, the last such flight before conditions become too dangerous for the crew, recorded a minimum central pressure of 857 millibars. Veila has produced a second concentric eye wall, a feature associated with the most intense tropical cyclones, and structural analysis suggests the inner eye wall is contracting, which in meteorological terms typically precedes an additional intensification cycle. The Voilaran government issued an emergency statement at 11:30 this morning, stating that all evacuation traffic on Highway 1 has been halted by order of the National Emergency Management Authority, as conditions on the Northern Highway have deteriorated to the point where vehicles and passengers are at risk from flying debris and roadway flooding even that far from the coast. This is a devastating development. An unknown number of vehicles, reports suggest tens of thousands, remain on or near Highway 1, whose passengers now face the prospect of riding out the storm in their vehicles on an exposed highway.
When Daniel says an unknown number of vehicles on Highway 1, I want our listeners to understand what that image looks like. Imagine a 6-lane highway, 3 lanes in each direction, now all 6 lanes pointing away from the coast, stretching 40 miles into the interior. Imagine that highway packed bumper to bumper with cars, trucks, buses, motorcycles, and bicycles at the shoulders. And now imagine that the government has announced, stop, don't move, stay in your vehicle. The hurricane is coming, and you are sitting there in your car, 40 miles from home, with your children in the back seat, watching the sky turn black to the south, and you cannot go forward, you cannot go back, and the wind is already picking up around you. We have received messages from people in exactly that situation. One listener, he gave his name as Marco, his vehicle a blue pickup truck, his location described as approximately mile marker 34 on Highway 1, writes, "We are parked between 2 semi-trucks. My wife and 2 kids are with me. We have water. We reclined the seats. My son asked me if we're going to die. I told him, no. Marco, we hear you. Every person listening to this broadcast right now is thinking of you."
I want to give a rapid infrastructure status update as of noon. Port Caldera International Airport, closed. Port of Caldera, closed and sustaining wind damage to loading cranes along the exposed northern pier. Highway 1, officially closed to new traffic and gridlocked with existing vehicles. Regional Road 7, open, but conditions deteriorating rapidly. The Moreau Delta Highway System, Regional Routes 12 and 14, closed as of 10:45 a.m. due to active storm surge flooding in the lowest lying sections. The Port Caldera Metropolitan Power Grid, approximately 340,000 customers now without power, or roughly 60% of the metropolitan service area. Communications. Cell tower function is degrading rapidly across the coastal belt. We are receiving reports that the Velaran National Cellular Network is running at approximately 40% normal capacity in the Port Caldera region. Internet service has been disrupted for much of the southern coast. Emergency satellite systems, however, remain operational, and government emergency broadcast systems, including this radio network, continue to function on backup power and antenna arrays positioned inland. Listeners, please keep this radio on.
I want to acknowledge the government employees who are still at their posts. At 12:15 in the afternoon, with Hurricane Veila less than 2 hours from landfall, there are Velaran National Weather Authority meteorologists still at their instruments in the inland facility at Valle Cruz, still producing forecasts, still updating the public. There are police officers still at road junctions directing what little traffic movement remains possible. There are dispatchers at emergency centers still answering calls, knowing that the number of calls is far beyond their capacity to respond to. There are volunteers at inland shelters, regular citizens who signed up weeks ago to help in exactly this kind of emergency, who are now managing 300 or 400 or 500 frightened people in a gymnasium, distributing crackers and water bottles and trying to answer questions they don't have the answers to. I want to say to each of those people, what you are doing matters. The fact that you showed up matters. The fact that you are still there matters more than you know.
The time is 1:38 in the afternoon. We are 7 hours and 34 minutes into our broadcast, and landfall is now imminent, estimated in approximately 2 hours and 15 minutes. I want to deliver a casualty update. The Santiago death toll has risen to 17, with the additional deaths resulting from flooding in the southern parishes, and 1 death in connection with a traffic accident during the island's internal evacuation. We are also receiving the first fatality reports from the Velaran mainland. The Velaran National Emergency Management Authority has confirmed 2 deaths in the Moreau Delta region, both attributed to drowning as storm surge flooding reached the barrier island communities approximately 3 hours earlier than originally predicted, due to the storm's slight westward track adjustment. These 2 individuals are described as elderly residents who could not be evacuated in time. Search and rescue teams cannot reach those communities currently due to flooding. I need to be direct with our listeners. The situation in the Moreau Delta is becoming critical extremely rapidly. The surge is arriving ahead of the storm itself, which is not unusual, but is exceptionally dangerous when that surge is projected to ultimately reach between 25 and 30 feet.
25 to 30 feet of ocean water pushed inland by a 200-mile-per-hour storm, arriving ahead of the storm itself. I want to try to describe what that means for the communities of Sola Marsh and the smaller settlements of the Moreau Delta. These are communities of wooden houses, of fishing families, of people who have lived on that water for generations and built their lives around it. The Delta is extraordinarily beautiful, and it is a tangle of waterways and mangroves and fishing docks and small restaurants and houses with gardens that face the sea. So people there know the water. They have a relationship with the sea that is almost spiritual. And right now, the sea is rising on them in a way that no generation before them has ever experienced. We received a message before communications in that area failed, from a woman named Esperanza, who described herself as being on the second floor of her home in Solamarsh, looking out the window at a street that was, she said, already under 4 feet of water, and the storm itself had not yet arrived. She said, "The water is brown. It's not blue anymore. It's brown. It brought everything with it. My neighbor's chairs, a child's bicycle, I can see them floating past my window." We have not heard from Esperanza since that message. We are hoping she is simply out of range.
The time is now 3:12 in the afternoon. We are 9 hours and 8 minutes into our emergency broadcast. At 3:04 p.m., the National Weather Authority issued the official landfall statement. The center of Hurricane Veila made landfall at 3:01 p.m. local time on the coast of the Velarán Republic, at a point approximately 6 miles south of Port Caldera's southern city limit, at the edge of the Moreau wetlands. At landfall, maximum sustained winds were measured at 221 miles per hour. The central pressure was 856 millibars. This is the most powerful landfalling tropical cyclone in recorded history by every metric. The eye wall is now sweeping across the southern half of Port Caldera and the entire Moreau Delta simultaneously. We have lost direct communications with Port Caldera. All cellular and internet infrastructure in the city is now offline. Emergency satellite uplinks from government installations in Port Caldera are transmitting intermittently. We are receiving fragmented data. What we can tell you is that the conditions in Port Caldera at this moment are beyond the threshold of human survivability in any unprotected environment. The wind alone would kill an unprotected human being within seconds of exposure.
We have lost contact with Port Caldera. I want our listeners to understand what that means and what it doesn't mean. It means we cannot see the city right now. It means the data pipelines are down. It means the cameras are off and the phone calls aren't getting through. But it does not mean that the city has ceased to exist. The people in their shelters, in their reinforced rooms, in the hospitals, in the community centers, they are still there. They are still breathing. They are holding hands in the dark. They are whispering things to each other that only people who love each other say. They are doing what human beings have always done in the most extreme circumstances. They are persisting. They are enduring. And we will be here when they come back online. We will be the voice they hear when the wind stops and they find a radio with working batteries. We will still be here.
I want to update the death toll as we have confirmed new figures from the regions where communications are still functioning. On Santiago Island, the toll has risen to 26. In the Caldera Archipelago, the Coast Guard has confirmed the deaths of 4 individuals on Isla Barreta, the same island where listener Tomas messaged us hours ago, following the collapse of a seawall that flooded the community center shelter. We do not have information on casualties within that shelter beyond those 4 initial confirmations. In the Moreau Delta on the Velarán mainland, the confirmed death toll stands at 9, though authorities have stated clearly that this number is based solely on reports that came in before communications failed, and the actual toll from the Delta region is expected to be significantly higher once the storm passes and rescue teams can access the area. Total confirmed deaths from Hurricane Veila as of 3:20 p.m., 41. That number will rise. We say that not to alarm, but because honesty is the one thing we will never compromise in this chair.
It is 4:45 in the afternoon. The eye of Hurricane Veila is moving through Port Caldera. This means that for a period of approximately 30 to 45 minutes, some residents in the direct path of the eye may experience a sudden, dramatic, almost surreal calm. The winds will drop, the rain will stop, the sky may even briefly clear and appear blue. And I need to say this as clearly as I possibly can. If you are in Port Caldera and you are experiencing that calm right now, Do not go outside. Do not believe the storm is over. The other side of the eye wall is coming, and it carries the same winds, the same surge, the same ferocity as what just passed. The eye is not safety. The eye is the halfway point of the most dangerous event any of you have ever experienced. Stay where you are, stay down, stay still. The second half of this storm will arrive within the hour, and in many respects, the back wall of a powerful hurricane is more disorienting to survivors precisely because they are already exhausted and they have let their guard down in the brief, treacherous quiet.
We have just received the first satellite uplinked emergency report from a Valaran National Guard officer at a forward position approximately 8 miles inland from Port Caldera's southern limit. The signal was fragmentary, but the key data points were confirmed. The officer reported that from his elevated position on a ridge, he could see what he described as a wall of water and debris advancing inland across the Moreau Delta plain. He estimated the visible surge front at a height he described as at least 3 stories. He reported that the highway interchange at Route 12 and the Veila Cruz connector, a major junction that sits at 11 feet above sea level, was completely submerged. He stated that pre-positioned rescue helicopters at the inland air facility at San Ronaldo will be unable to launch for search and rescue until at minimum 2 hours after wind speeds at that facility drop below 45 miles per hour. He estimated that would not occur until approximately 8 to 9 this evening. The situation in the Moreau Delta during those intervening hours will be beyond the reach of any assistance. The people there are on their own until the storm passes.
The time is 6:17 in the evening. We are 12 hours and 13 minutes into our broadcast. The back wall of Hurricane Veila's eye wall has moved through the Port Caldera area, and we are beginning to receive our first fragmentary communications from the city. They are brief, they are incomplete, but they are there, and they tell a story of extraordinary devastation. The first confirmed report from inside Port Caldera came at 5:58 p.m. via a government emergency satellite phone in the basement of the National Emergency Management Authority's main building, which we are told is the only intact floor of that structure. The official on the line described what he could see through the slitted basement windows as everything is gone from the waterfront to the avenue. Everything. He was referring to the 4-block stretch of Port Caldera's historic harbor district, centuries-old buildings, the central fish market, the cultural museum, the ferry terminal. He said water was still actively flowing through the streets at the level of second-floor windows, meaning surge flooding is still present at approximately 15 to 18 feet in the harbor district.
As conditions begin to marginally permit communication, I can give the following infrastructure status for Port Caldera based on the fragmentary reports arriving at our emergency management contacts. The Port of Caldera, destroyed. Both container cranes on the northern pier have collapsed. The fuel tanker that was moored at Dock 7 at the time of closure has broken its moorings and grounded on the rocks of Punta del Sur, approximately 2 miles south of the port. Its structural integrity is unknown. Port Caldera International Airport. Initial reports describe the terminal building as partially collapsed. The control tower is standing, but the main international terminal's roof has failed over the departure concourse. The runway is flooded and debris covered. The 3 major hospitals, Caldera General is reporting via satellite that the building is intact and the backup generators are functioning. They have 43 patients, 12 staff, and 3 doctors, all alive. St. Ronaldo Medical Center has not transmitted any signal. The University Hospital of the Coast transmitted a single emergency beacon at 4:30 p.m. and has not transmitted since. The status of those facilities and their occupants is, at this hour, unknown.
We received a message at 6:30 this evening from a listener who identifies herself as Anna, a search and rescue volunteer who had been pre-positioned at the inland community of Rio Verde, approximately 22 miles from the coast. She says, "The wind stopped here about 40 minutes ago. We have 18 boats, we have medical supplies, we have trained personnel, we are ready to go, we are watching the clock. Every minute we wait is a minute someone is waiting for us. Please tell people help is coming. It is staged, and it is ready, and it is coming the moment it is safe to launch. Please tell them to hold on. Anna." And every volunteer standing next to her in Rio Verde tonight, we hear you. We will tell them, if you are listening to this broadcast from a shelter, from a rooftop, from a flooded room, help is staged at Rio Verde. Trained rescuers are waiting at the edge of the storm. They are coming as soon as they physically can. Hold on.
It is 8:04 in the evening. We are 14 hours into our broadcast. Hurricane Veila has now moved inland and is weakening, as all landfalling hurricanes do once cut off from warm ocean water. The National Weather Authority is tracking the center of what remains of Veila, approximately 34 miles inland, moving at 14 miles per hour on a northwest track. Sustained winds at the center have dropped to 140 miles per hour. Still an extraordinarily dangerous storm, but diminishing by the hour. However, I must report that the rainfall being produced by the weakening system remains extreme. The Weather Authority is recording rainfall rates of 3 to 5 inches per hour across a broad inland area, and this is causing rapid flash flooding across interior river basins. The Valle Cruz River, which runs through Velara's primary inland city, has risen 14 feet in the past 4 hours, and is now overflowing its banks into the western residential districts of Valle Cruz. This is significant. Valle Cruz was designated as a primary evacuation destination. Approximately 200,000 evacuees are currently sheltering in Valle Cruz. The city was not in the hurricane's direct path, but it is now experiencing dangerous secondary flooding from rainfall alone.
The evacuation destination is now flooding. That is a sentence I wish I did not have to say. To be clear, the flooding in Valle Cruz is not at the catastrophic level seen in Port Caldera and the Miro Delta. Current reports describe flooding in the western residential areas at 1 to 3 feet. Dangerous, but not immediately life-threatening for most able-bodied adults on upper floors. But the people sheltering in Valle Cruz include the elderly, the disabled, the sick, the people who evacuated precisely because they were the most vulnerable to exactly this kind of situation. The Valle Cruz Convention Center, which has approximately 22,000 people inside, is located on higher ground within the city and is not currently threatened by the rising river. But the gymnasium shelters in the western districts, multiple sites with several thousand evacuees each, are on lower ground and are now in the path of the flooding. Authorities in Valle Cruz are working to arrange secondary internal transfers, moving people from lower shelters to higher ground. They are doing this in the dark, in heavy rain, with limited vehicles, and with 200,000 frightened people spread across a city that is itself under strain.
The total confirmed death toll from Hurricane Veila is now 89, as of 8:30 in the evening. I will break that down geographically. Santiago Island, 31 confirmed dead. The Caldera Archipelago, 14 confirmed dead, with search and rescue teams now able to operate in some parts of the island chain, and additional casualties expected as teams reach more remote areas. The Miro Delta mainland, confirmed deaths, 27, with authorities emphasizing that this number is based solely on early reports, and the actual toll from the Delta, which was directly struck by the storm surge and the highest winds, is unknown and expected to be substantially higher. Port Caldera City, confirmed deaths, 17, based on reports from the areas where communications have been partially restored. This does not include the Harbor District, the Miro waterfront, or any area south of the Central Avenue, as those areas remain inaccessible due to flooding and debris. The 89 figure is a confirmed floor, not an estimate of the true toll. That distinction is critically important, and we will never conflate the two.
The rescue operation has begun. At 8:15 this evening, the first rescue boats launched from Rio Verde, Anna's crew and 18 others alongside her, entered the flood zone, moving toward the Muro Delta. Simultaneously, rescue helicopters from the San Ronaldo Inland Air Facility launched at 8 p.m. once winds there dropped below 45 miles per hour. 4 military helicopters and 2 Coast Guard aircraft are now conducting search and rescue operations over the southern Port Caldera waterfront and the northern Muro Delta. The pilots and crews of those aircraft are flying over a landscape that, by all accounts, has been fundamentally transformed. What was a coastal city and a river delta is now, for a significant portion of its area, an inland ocean. One helicopter pilot transmitted a brief report at 8:45 p.m. on the government emergency channel. He said, "We are over what the map says is the Sola Marsh district. There is water as far as the horizon in 3 directions. There are rooftops. There are people on some of the rooftops. We are attempting to reach the nearest concentration. We are attempting to reach the nearest concentration." 6 words that carry the entire weight of this night.
It is 10:22 in the evening. We are 16 hours and 18 minutes into our emergency broadcast. I want to give a rescue operations status update. Since 8:15 this evening, the combined rescue operations in Port Caldera and the Muro Delta have resulted in the confirmed rescue of 847 individuals extracted from rooftops, upper floors, floating debris, and in several cases from trees and utility poles where people had climbed above the waterline. Additionally, the rescue operations on the Caldera Archipelago, which began earlier in the evening when conditions there moderated first, have accounted for the rescue of approximately 2,200 individuals from Isla Barreta alone. The overall Santiago rescue operation has extracted an estimated 3,400 people from flooding situations across the island. These are the first concrete positive numbers of this broadcast. And I want to be clear. Behind each of those numbers is a human being who was pulled from the water, or from a roof, or from a collapsed structure by another human being who chose to be there. The rescued and the rescuers are equally remarkable.
I want to share something from the helicopter transmissions that is making its way through the emergency communications network right now because I think it is important. One of the Coast Guard helicopter crews working over the Muro Delta transmitted that they located the Sola Marsh Community Health Center, which is a 1-story clinic that has been completely submerged. The roof of that building, which is flat and concrete, is above water, and on it, according to the crew's transmission, they found 11 people. Among them, the crew reported, was a woman who had given birth during the storm. During the storm, on the roof of a clinic above a flooded delta, in the dark, the crew confirmed that the mother and infant are alive and were airlifted to the San Ronaldo Field Hospital along with the others on that roof. I do not know that woman's name. I do not know what she named her child, but I know that that child is the first human being born into the world that exists after Hurricane Veila. Whatever future that child will grow up in, they began it on a rooftop above a flooded delta, watched over by whoever it is we turn to when we have nothing left but hope.
The time is 12:01 in the morning. We are now officially 18 hours into our emergency broadcast, and we are crossing into a new day. Hurricane Veila is now classified as a tropical storm, its center located approximately 95 miles inland from where it made landfall. Its remnants continue to produce heavy rainfall across the interior, contributing to ongoing river flooding, but the immediate wind threat has ended. The storm surge has begun to recede along the coast, though in many areas of the Muro Delta, flooding remains at between 8 and 14 feet above normal water levels. Full surge recession is not expected for another 12 to 18 hours. Port Caldera communications have been partially restored across approximately 30% of the city via emergency cellular relay systems deployed by the Valaran military. Reports from within the city describe catastrophic damage across the waterfront and southern districts, moderate to severe damage across the central districts, and heavy but survivable damage in the northern and highland districts. The death toll in Port Caldera has been revised upward to 44 confirmed. Emergency officials have stated clearly that this number will rise significantly as rescue teams access areas that have been unreachable since landfall.
At midnight, with 18 hours behind us and the immediate violence of the storm now past, a different kind of crisis is beginning to emerge. And I think it's important we talk about it because it will define the next days, weeks, and months for the people of Veila and Santiago. The supply chain for Port Caldera is severed, the port is destroyed, the airport is non-functional, the primary highway is damaged and clogged, a city of 1.4 million people, however many of them sheltered in place, however many are returning, needs water, food, medicine, and fuel every single day. Those systems do not exist right now. The Valaran government's inland stockpile at Valley Cruz is the primary resource, but it was designed to support 72 hours of emergency supply for the expected survivor population, not an extended period of sustained need. The federal states of Moreno's naval vessels, pre-positioned offshore, are already moving toward Port Caldera to begin establishing an emergency supply corridor by sea, but the port is destroyed and offloading cargo onto a rubble-strewn coastline is an enormous logistical challenge. The international community has a narrow window, roughly 72 hours, to begin meaningful supply delivery before the situation within Port Caldera risks becoming a secondary humanitarian catastrophe layered on top of the first.
I want to give listeners a status update on the populations we have been tracking throughout this broadcast. The 9,000 residents and tourists who were sheltering in place on the Caldera Archipelago at the time of landfall. Rescue operations have now reached all 9 islands. As of midnight, 7,847 individuals have been confirmed as located, either rescued or sheltering in intact structures and awaiting evacuation. The remaining approximately 1,100 individuals have not yet been located. Operations continue through the night. On Santiago Island, the emergency situation has stabilized. The death toll there stands at 38 confirmed, with approximately 4,200 people rescued from flooding situations across the island. The Santiago government has declared a national mourning period and has formally thanked the international responders who arrived within hours of the storm's passage. The families on Highway 1, including Marco, who messaged us from mile marker 34, we have received confirmation from the Valley Cruz Emergency Coordination Center that systematic outreach to stranded vehicles along Highway 1 has begun, with emergency teams moving vehicle by vehicle through the line. So far, no fatalities have been confirmed among the highway stranded population.
No fatalities on Highway 1. That is, I need to sit with that for a moment. Tens of thousands of people in their vehicles on an exposed highway as the most powerful hurricane in recorded history made landfall 6 miles to their south. No fatalities confirmed. I think of Marco in his blue pickup truck telling his son they were not going to die. I hope Marco is reading his son a bedtime story right now in a shelter somewhere inland. I genuinely hope that. We received a message that came through at 11:30 tonight from someone who identified himself as a firefighter from the Havenbrook station, the coastal town north of Port Caldera that caught the northern edge of the storm. He writes, "We went out at first light meaning the moment the wind dropped below what would flip our trucks, and the town is bad, but it is standing. Most of it is standing. There are boats in the streets, and the pier is gone, and the market is gone, but the houses are standing. We are going house to house. We have found 17 people who sheltered in place. All of them are alive. One of them, an old man named Ferdo, made us coffee on a camp stove and asked us what took us so long. That old man making coffee on a camp stove the moment the storm passed. I don't think I have ever heard anything that felt braver than that.
The time is 2:15 in the morning. We are 20 hours and 11 minutes into our broadcast. I want to provide the most comprehensive casualty and situation update we have compiled thus far. Total confirmed deaths from Hurricane Veila across all affected regions as of 2:15 a.m. 187. That breaks down as follows: Santiago Island 38, Caldera Archipelago 31, with an additional 47 individuals still unaccounted for across the island chain. Port Caldera City 79, as rescue teams have now reached the harbor district and portions of the southern waterfront, and found conditions there that the lead rescue coordinator described via satellite transmission as consistent with the most severe storm damage I have encountered in 20 years of emergency response. The Moreau Delta mainland, 39 confirmed, with authorities stating that the true toll from the Delta may not be fully known for days, as access to the most deeply flooded interior areas remains limited. Valle Cruz, secondary flooding, 0 deaths confirmed, 14 injuries, including 3 serious. Highway 1 stranded vehicle population, 0 deaths, 22 minor injuries. The national government of Veila has stated that the missing persons registry, compiled from family reports and shelter check-in data, currently shows 1,841 individuals whose location is unknown.
1,841 missing. That is the number that will define the next 48 hours. Every one of those people has someone waiting to hear from them. Every one of those 1,841 missing is somebody's Marco, somebody's Petros, somebody's Esperanza, somebody's Tomas. Rescue and recovery teams are working through the night without pause. International teams from Caldoria, the federal states of Moreno, and Cresa have arrived at the Valle Cruz staging area and are being integrated into the rescue operation. A field coordination center has been established at the San Ronaldo Air Facility. The Cruz Azul has set up a family reunification hotline that has already received over 50,000 calls in its first hours of operation. International media are beginning to arrive at the inland staging areas. The story of Hurricane Veila is beginning to reach the rest of the world in the way that only daylight imagery and video can convey. And when the sun rises on what has happened here, the world will understand something that we, in the dark of this radio booth, have known since 6 o'clock yesterday morning. This was a civilizational event, not just a storm. An event that will mark a before and after in the history of this region.
It is now 4 o'clock in the morning, 22 hours into our emergency broadcast. I want to mark this moment because it represents a transition from the immediate life safety phase of this emergency to the sustained response and recovery phase, which will be longer and harder and less visible to the outside world, but which is every bit as important. Here is where things stand structurally as we approach dawn. The government of Veila has activated a National Reconstruction Authority, a body created by law in 2017 specifically for this eventuality, and has appointed its first emergency director. International aid shipments are already arriving at the Valle Cruz inland hub, delivered by military aircraft from 4 nations. The first sea supply delivery, organized by the federal states of Moreno Naval Logistics Team, is expected to begin offloading at the partially intact northern section of the port of Caldera at approximately 8 o'clock this morning, about 4 hours from now. That initial shipment includes 400,000 liters of bottled water, 120,000 emergency food rations, 15 tons of medical supplies, and 4 field hospital units. It will not be sufficient for the need. It is, however, a beginning.
I want to talk about what comes next. Not the rescue operations, not the supply chains, but the people. The 1.4 million people of Port Caldera, the 600,000 in the Moreau Delta, the 280,000 in Havenbrook. Those 2.28 million people on the coast of Valera are going to wake up in the hours and days ahead to a coastline that has been permanently altered. Some of them will wake up in shelters, uncertain if their homes still stand. Some will wake up in their homes, which still stand, but will look out their windows at blocks of rubble where their neighbors' homes once were. Some will wake up in hospitals. Some will wake up and begin the process of counting what they have lost, which for some of them will include people they loved more than anything in this world, and all of them, all 2.28 million of them, and the 38 million Velaran citizens beyond the coast will begin the question of what now? How do we go on from here? What does rebuilding mean when what was built before lies underwater in debris? And the answer will not come from governments or aid organizations, though those matter enormously. The answer will come from the same place it always comes from in the aftermath of catastrophe, from communities. From neighbors, from the man who lost his house, but found his neighbor's child on a rooftop and who held that child through the longest night of both their lives.
The time is 5:50 in the morning. We are 23 hours and 46 minutes into our emergency broadcast. And as we approach the 24-hour mark, I want to deliver the final comprehensive situation report of this initial broadcast phase. Blackout Radio will continue with ongoing coverage as the recovery effort unfolds, with regular updates through our standard and emergency programming. But let me give our listeners the fullest picture we have right now. Hurricane Veila, the most powerful tropical cyclone ever recorded, made landfall on the western coast of the Republic of Veila at 3:01 p.m. yesterday. At landfall, maximum sustained winds were 221 miles per hour. Central pressure was 856 millibars. The storm surge reached a peak estimated height of 32 feet in the Moreau Delta. The hurricane directly impacted the Velaran Republic, Santiago Island, and the Caldera Archipelago. The total confirmed death toll as of 5:50 a.m. stands at 241 people. Among those, 38 on Santiago, 44 on the Caldera Archipelago, after additional bodies were recovered during the night, 97 in Port Caldera and its immediate coastal zone, and 62 in the Moreau Delta and Barrier Island communities. The number of individuals still listed as missing stands at 1,612, after 229 of the earlier missing persons were confirmed as located during the overnight operations.
And I want to sit in this final hour of our first day and be honest with our listeners, because I think honesty is the most important thing we can offer right now. The 241 confirmed deaths will not be the final number. The 1,612 missing will not all be found alive. The Moreau Delta, whose most deeply flooded areas still have not been fully reached, will account for a larger toll than currently reflected. Responsible emergency management officials have indicated privately that the final death toll, once all areas are searched and all missing persons are resolved, could be in the range of 600 to 900 people across all affected regions. That is the range being discussed at senior levels of the Velaran Emergency Management Authority. It is a number that would make Veila one of the deadliest weather disasters in this region's modern history. And yet, and I say this not to minimize one single death, not to diminish 1 second of one family's grief, the fact that the number is in the hundreds and not in the tens of thousands is the direct result of the decisions made by hundreds of thousands of people in the 36 hours before the storm arrived. People who evacuated when they were afraid and didn't want to go, officials who organized when they were overwhelmed, volunteers who showed up to stages when they could have stayed home. a government that issued the warning 3 days early and committed every resource it had to moving as many people as possible out of the path of the storm.
As the first light of a new morning arrives over the Valaran interior, here is what we know about the condition of the world after Hurricane Veila. Port Caldera stands. It is gravely wounded, but it is not gone. The harbor district will require years to rebuild. The southern residential zones suffered catastrophic losses in structures that were built below modern standards. The northern and highland districts of the city, where construction codes were more rigorously enforced following the 2019 storm, fared significantly better, with a majority of structures reporting repairable damage rather than total loss. The airport will be operational for emergency flights within 72 hours, according to the Civil Aviation Authority. The port's northern terminal, while damaged, can accommodate emergency shipping within the next 12 hours. Power restoration in the less damaged northern districts of Port Caldera is expected to begin within 48 hours. Full power restoration for the entire city is estimated at between 6 and 12 weeks. The Moreau Delta faces a far longer and more painful road. The low-lying communities that took the full force of the surge, Sola Marsh, Beretta Crossing, Isla Verde, sustained near total structural destruction in many blocks. Rebuilding decisions will need to be made at a governmental level about whether to reconstruct those communities in their current locations, or whether the combination of sea level risk and future storm intensity requires a managed relocation of these populations to higher ground.
That question, whether to rebuild where things stood or to acknowledge that some places along this coast cannot be safely inhabited anymore in an era of increasingly powerful storms, is perhaps the most important question that this event will force Veila to confront. It is not a comfortable question. These are communities with histories that stretch back for generations. They are places where people were born, where their parents are buried, where their children learn to swim in the same waters their grandparents swam in. Asking people to leave those places permanently is not something any government does easily or any community accepts willingly. But the mathematics of surge and sea level and storm intensity are not negotiated with history or with love. They are physics. And Veila, like coastal communities in every part of the world, will be grappling with that tension between the life you built and the place that can no longer safely hold it for a generation. What I can say, what I believe with everything in me, after 24 hours of listening to this coast hold on, is that the people of Veila are not broken, bent nearly past what seems survivable, grieving in ways that will take years to even name, but not broken. The woman who gave birth on a rooftop in the Moreau Delta is not broken. The nurse at Caldera General who promised her patients she would not leave is not broken. The guitar player on Highway 1 playing to the evacuating thousands in a bruised sky is not broken.
In the days and weeks and years that follow, the federal states of Moreno has committed to a multi-year reconstruction partnership with Veila, beginning with an emergency fund equivalent to $4.2 billion in international currency. Caldera has pledged medical support teams for a minimum of 6 months. The International Cruz Azul network has committed to maintaining field operations across Veila for at least 1 year. The Veilaran government has pledged a full after-action review of its emergency response, including examination of why evacuation infrastructure was insufficient to move the full coastal population in the time available, and has committed to a 20-year coastal resilience investment plan to be funded jointly with international partners. The Caldera Archipelago will be reoccupied, but with dramatically enhanced building codes and permanent emergency shelters on every inhabited island, rated for Category 6 conditions. The Moreau Delta communities will be rebuilt, but not all of them where they stood. The government has announced the first managed retreat program in Veilaran history, moving the most vulnerable delta communities to newly constructed elevated settlements 12 miles inland, with full infrastructure support, fair compensation for property lost, and a commitment that no family will be asked to leave a home that can reasonably be protected. Santiago Island, which suffered grievously in its coastal districts, but whose interior infrastructure largely survived, is expected to begin meaningful physical recovery within weeks.
When we came on the air 24 hours ago, I told our listeners that we would be with them every step of the way. We meant that. We will be back at this desk. We will continue to report. We will read your messages. We will speak the names of the missing and the found. We will cover the funerals and the rebuilding and the arguments about what should be reconstructed and what should be left to the sea and the memory. We will be here for all of it. But for this moment, for the conclusion of this first 24 hours, I want to just say something simple. I have been a radio journalist for 16 years. I have covered floods and fires and political crises and disasters of every kind. I have sat in this chair through things that I thought in the moment could not possibly be survived. And what I have learned over and over again, in event after event, in crisis after crisis, is that people survive. Not always, not without cost, not without grief that does not leave and scars that don't fully fade, and a place in the memory that is always tender when you press it. But they survive, they wake up after the worst night of their lives, and they find each other and they rebuild something. Maybe not the same thing, maybe something harder won and more honest and more careful about what it means to live on the edge of the sea. But something. The sun is rising right now over the Republic of Veila, and in the dark of shelters and on the rooftops of houses that held, and in the holds of rescue boats moving through flooded streets, people are watching it come up, and they are still here.
Here is the final accounting for the record, as it was ultimately established. The Republic of Veila sustained the direct landfall of Category 6 Hurricane Veila, the most powerful tropical cyclone in recorded history. The final confirmed death toll, issued by the Veilaran National Emergency Management Authority 14 days after the storm, was 847 people across all affected regions, 214 in Port Caldera, 381 in the Moreau Delta and Barrier Island communities, 44 on the Caldera Archipelago, and 38 on Santiago Island. A further 2,109 people sustained serious injuries requiring hospitalization. Approximately 160,000 structures were damaged or destroyed across the impact zone. 1.1 million people were displaced from their homes, with approximately 400,000 remaining in emergency shelter for more than 30 days. The economic damage to Veila was estimated at the equivalent of 73% of its annual gross domestic product, a wound of generational proportions. And yet, the Moreau Delta Reconstruction Authority broke ground on its first new elevated community within 3 months of landfall. The first permanent families moved into those new homes 11 months after the storm. Port Caldera International Airport reopened for full commercial operations 9 months after landfall. The Port of Caldera was restored to 60% operational capacity within 5 months, and full capacity within 14 months. Havenbrook rebuilt its pier and reopened its market within 6 months. On Santiago Island, the Barrio Nuevo neighborhood, the first to flood, the first to lose lives, was rebuilt on elevated foundations and became, within 2 years, a model for resilient coastal construction studied by engineers from across the region. And the guitar player on Highway 1, we eventually learned his name was Rafael, a music teacher from the southern district of Port Caldera. He survived. He went back to the city when the roads reopened, found what remained of his street, and set up a free music school for children displaced by the storm, in a repaired community center 3 blocks from where his own home once stood. He named it after the storm. He said he wanted the children to know that the most terrible things can be given names, and that naming them is the first step toward not being afraid.
The world did not end with Hurricane Veila. It never does. What happens after the worst is not an ending. It is the beginning of the long, hard, unglamorous, absolutely essential work of continuing. Veila continued, Santiago continued, the families on Highway 1 continued, the nurse at Caldera General continued, the child born on a rooftop in the Miro Delta. A girl, we eventually learned, named Celeste, continued. In 5, 10, 15 years, Celeste will grow up in a Velara that rebuilt itself after the worst storm in recorded history. She will grow up in a country that asked hard questions about where it is safe to live and made hard choices in answer to those questions. She will grow up in communities that know, in their bones and in their collective memory, what it cost to be here, what it cost to stay, what it cost to leave, what it cost to return. And she will grow up knowing, because it will be told to her, because stories like this must always be told. That's so that on the night she came into the world, there was a radio somewhere still broadcasting, still speaking, still saying, "We are here. Hold on, this is Blackout Radio. I am Maya Ross."
And I am Daniel Voss. On behalf of everyone at Blackout Radio, to every listener who stayed with us through this long night, who held their radio in the dark and heard our voices and felt a little less alone, we saw you. We heard you. We will not forget what you endured, and we will not forget what you survived. Stay safe. Stay together. This broadcast is concluded.